I think I'm here as Exhibit A of the most recent opportunity of a rookie who, like all of you, had a moment in her life where it just became so important to change the world. And really just through sheer determination and a little bit of luck and a lot of elbow grease, I got a law passed this past summer I didn't get the law passed. I initiated a process, and JP and Saul will give us more details on the last final pieces. So my personal story is that 6 years ago, today actually, my son Jacob was diagnosed with medulloblastoma, a form of pediatric brain cancer that 400 kids per year are diagnosed with. And he died 2 years later. He was 10 years old. And we all have stories. That was mine. It transformed me. And so Jacob died on a Tuesday, and Wednesday morning I put my laptop on the dining room table and I said, that's it, I'm starting a foundation. And that's how I started Kids versus Cancer. In the Jewish tradition, people contribute very generously at funerals, and so I was fortunate in that regard in that I started up with a little teeny slush fund, and for all of you who have logistic questions, come on afterwards, and I'm happy to go over some of those issues. But really the most important thing I think I did is I just told everyone that I wanted to start a foundation. I wanted to look at why there are no drugs developed for any cancers that affect children. And there are as many cancers for children as for adults, and they're different. So kids aren't in great shape. I decided early on that I wanted to look at legislative change because I wasn't focusing on just one cancer, my son's cancer. I was really focusing on many rare cancers that kids get. And I did one lucky thing in retrospect, well, two things. One is, as I was telling everyone what I was interested in, one friend of mine told me about a recent piece of legislation that had just passed, and could we extend it to pediatric cancer? I decided to extend to pediatric rare diseases generally. Another friend pointed me into the direction of someone he knew, and someone he knew who became a tremendous mentor for me. And then I think I was surfing the web one day, and I came across Julia. And that was an incredible stroke of luck. I cold called her, and she became a tremendous mentor for me. I'm not sure Julia really wants me to say this, but the truth is, get her cell phone number, just call her all the time, because she's an incredible help. So what I did is I learned a little bit more about this piece of legislation that had passed in 2007. I learned who the senators were who were the leads on it. I went and I talked to, and I called up Ellie Dehoney, who was a staffer, still working for Senator Sherrod Brown. She'd been working with him in 2007 when this original piece of legislation passed. I remember I went up there and I just thought, oh my God, I have never been on Capitol Hill before. I really have no idea how to structure this meeting, what to do. So I went in, and the first thing I said to Ellie is, listen, I've never lobbied before. I've never been on Capitol Hill. And she said, oh my God, that's the best thing anyone said to me all day. And I was incredibly relieved. And then the meeting was great. I'm not comfortable being an act-up kind of person and chaining people to fences. I spoke really authentically about my life and my experience. Especially, Jacob had died only less than a year ago, and I was still very shaky. It was really hard. And she just started crying, and we had this amazing moment together. And what happened to me is Ellie said, that's it, I'm gonna help you. This idea you have, it could be an interesting idea. And she sent me to various other staffers on the Hill who started sending me to their friends. And that is how I ended up building my legislative strategy. I knew nothing, but Ellie sent me to one of Henry Waxman's former staffers, who is now at the FDA. And she and I talked about it. And she said, look, Nancy, so the idea I had was to create a financial incentive for pediatric rare disease drug development. And the incentive created a burden on the FDA to provide faster reviews for certain drugs. And she said, why would we do this? There's legislative issues. And I just said, look, Jacob died. At one point, do we need to change how the FDA works? And she stopped, and that was it. And then she started sending me to her friends. And next thing you know it, I was sent to someone who was on Henry Waxman's staff, and Rachel Schur, and Rachel said, all right, well, this is interesting. We're not going to sponsor it, but here's who I want you to work on it on the House side. And she sent me to Sue Myrick's office and to Anna Eshu's office. And really, this is how the whole thing worked. I just would go into each office. I'd literally start by saying, I'm a rookie. I don't know really very much about what I'm doing, and I'm asking you to help me figure it out. So that's the laying out the issue and asking for help. And then the second piece of it is just trying to propose a solution. I'm a lawyer by training, which helped. As I was telling all my friends what I was doing, someone put me in touch with a law firm. I met with the law firm. We talked a lot about different ideas of how to work together. They eventually gave me a second-year associate, which wasn't very inspiring, but he turned out to be fantastic, and we wrote a draft piece of legislation together. And I found that really useful because when you walk into an office in the Hill and you have something to start the conversation, it's a whole lot easier when there's specifics laid out, when they don't have to send something to legislative counsel themselves to draft. And really, this is what we did. And I would go into each office. What I learned, and what you will all learn, is that you can make someone cry if you choose to. And use it, I mean, that's what we have. I didn't have cash. I didn't have numbers like the AIDS movement or like other movements, but we're just saying the right thing. The right thing is we have to change the world. There were lots of ins and outs, but I will just say that, and I hired this adorable 20-something to go on the Hill for me, and she would explain our legislation, and she would ask for co-sponsorship, and she would learn how to do it too, and she's smart and articulate and adorable, and she befriended, all the staffers are like 20-somethings, and she befriended them, and she dated them, and she was phenomenal, and we got 173 co-sponsors, and then somehow it passed. So I'm going to turn this over to two of the staffers who've been so helpful, but I will just say to you, you really can start with just an idea and a passion. You don't need the most famous person in the room. You don't need Michael Milken. Not that it's bad to have Michael Milken, but really, you just use what you got. And on the Hill, staffers are incredible. I'll just end with one more side comment that turned out to be very helpful. So I do not accept any funding from industry, and I believe that in my personal case, we would not have had the legislation pass had we accepted pharma funding. The reason is that many liberal Democrats in particular have felt, they've expressed to me concern that there is a conflict that arises in this case. There are many advocacy groups that do accept pharma funding and it works for them. I think these groups tend to have a lot of credibility already established. And in my case, I'm quite certain that that was important for us. So I just wanted to flag that for those of you who decide you want to accept it because you have patient support efforts or other drug development efforts, you may want to think through how to ensure credibility. All right, thank you.
All right. So my name is Saul Hernandez. I appreciate you all having me here today. I am Congressman G.K. Butterfield's legislative director. He represents the 1st Congressional District of North Carolina. Under the new lines that were just drawn, we now represent about 60% of the city and county of Durham, where Duke University Hospital is located. And we have a lot of other very strong healthcare research institutions in our district as well. So what I would like to talk about today, and to piggyback on what Nancy was talking about, how do you go about advocating for something you're passionate about before Congress? And I think the most important thing, to Nancy's point, is to find something that you are very personally passionate about. In Nancy's case, her son's death caused her to be spurred to action, to want to do something to honor her son, but to also make sure that other people, other young people, and adults, for that matter, in the country, don't have to experience the same thing that she experienced. And so Mr. Butterfield and through me worked with Nancy to include a section in the Prescription Drug User Fee Act that provided incentives for speeding drugs to market. And Nancy, I just want to say I really appreciate having worked with you on that, and am truly impressed and thankful for your passion on this. So the first thing is to be passionate. I think the second thing is to really work hard to line up stakeholders before you even contact a congressional office. So you find a problem and you arrive at a solution, and it's best before you go into a congressional office to make sure you have all your ducks in a row, to have wide-ranging support from different organizations that are, that all sort of coalesce around the same goal. And the reason that is staff in members' offices often, have 6 or 7 meetings a day. I had 2 this morning, came here, and then I have another one at noon that I think I may have to have one of my colleagues take. But we like to see a consensus when you come in, and that sort of gives us a green light in that folks who are out in the public that are concerned about certain things are all in agreement on one particular on I guess moving forward. So when you come in to the office, I would recommend working both sides of the aisle. It's in our political climate now, it is things are very polarized. Republicans don't get along with Democrats. Democrats don't get along with Republicans. But I think that's at a very high level. Staff work very well together. I've worked with JP in the past, and folks from Mr. McCall's office from Texas, who helped Mr. Butterfield, include this section in the Creating Hope Act in PDUFA. So I would, strongly recommend making sure that you contact both sides of the aisle and trying to get in front of as many people as possible and to tell your story and to make it compelling. And as Nancy said, let them know. Let us know exactly why you're so passionate about your issue. So once we sort of draft a bill, it's introduced by a member, and it's referred to the Committee of Jurisdiction. And so often things dealing with health care, depending on what sort of what the issue is, it will go to Ways and Means or go to the Committee on Energy and Commerce. My boss, Mr. Butterfield, is on Energy and Commerce. He just became a member of the Health Subcommittee. JP's boss as well is on ENC and has been on the Health Subcommittee for some time. One really important thing to keep in mind is that a bill that is introduced, once it works its way through several steps of the committee process, and I think JP is going to talk about this in greater detail, it never looks the same on the other end. There are several steps in getting a bill through committee. So you introduce a bill, it is referred to a subcommittee. The subcommittee holds a hearing. We have stakeholders come and testify before the committee or before the subcommittee. Members are able to ask questions and gain a greater understanding of the bill, what the goals are. And then through all of that, the committee staff works with interested members like Mr. Butterfield and Mr. Burgess to do what's called marking up the bill, and it goes through subcommittee markup. Once a bill is marked up, several changes are made, and then it's voted on and hopefully will clear the subcommittee to go to full committee markup, where other members of the Energy and Commerce Committee who don't sit on the Health Subcommittee are able to weigh in. And then there are further changes, and then eventually it will hopefully be discharged favorably and make it to the floor. As JP will agree, I think nothing in Congress happens overnight, or even in a single Congress. And oftentimes Nancy's been working on her bill since 2007, and it was just last year that we were able to get this done. So I encourage you to not be discouraged by the slow pace of things. If you have something that you are passionate about, do not give up. Staff may change, members may change, but the issues remain the same, and they are as compelling today as they will be 2 years from now. And so I think it's very, very important to not get discouraged, and to just be very committed to your goal. In addition, and I guess stepping back, my notes are not in chronological order, so I apologize. But I would also recommend, once you have a bill, approaching both chambers, both the House and the Senate, to move things in tandem. There are 435 House members, 100 senators. The senators tend to be much more deliberate than the House is with respect to moving legislation, but if you are able to have two tandem tracks going at the same time, one will, it is just more helpful, I think, because if it moves in the Senate, that's great, then the House can take it up. If it moves in the House first, then the Senate can take it up. And so it just helps sort of expedite the process. I think it's also important, once you have a bill, and have a member to introduce it, to hold media events. And Julia and RDLA is very good about this, that it doesn't happen if nobody knows about it. And so publicity and continuing to beat the drum is, I think, a really, really important aspect that some folks who come before the committee or come before Congress don't really appreciate that. If you are able to drive support from a media standpoint, and that gets back to the members' congressional districts, those folks are going to call our office, they're going to call JP's office, and all other 435 members, and say, this is something that is really important to us personally as your constituents, and we need for you to advocate for this. And so I would strongly recommend that. When you said somebody famous, Nancy, I wasn't sure what you were saying. I would recommend, if there is a celebrity endorser that you are able to get a hold of for a particular issue, oftentimes that can carry weight, particularly with constituents in calling and drumming up support for what you're trying to do. And also, letter writing campaigns are very helpful. We get literally thousands of letters a week in our office, and we look at every single one of them, and that's our job, to look at every single one of them. And if we see 300 letters on one topic, that's something that we take notice of, and it moves to the top of our list. I would also urge, and the government is broken up into three branches, and I don't think it can be overstated the importance of working with the appropriate department or agency in advance of introducing a piece of legislation. Oftentimes you'll find the FDA or NIH or the National Science Foundation are interested in the same thing that you're interested about, but nobody knows that. And so if you can find the appropriate department agency and work through your member of Congress to help facilitate those meetings, if you can get the agency or department on board, it carries tremendous weight before the committee. And so I would strongly recommend doing that. There are plenty of resources available online for free to let you know who the proper contacts are in the various departments. And if you're having trouble or hitting a wall trying to get a meeting with the appropriate person, contact your member or your senator and let them know why this is important, and they can help facilitate that meeting. I suppose that's all I have to add. I just, I think the committee process and making sure that the key members of the subcommittee and committee of jurisdiction are clued in early on, that you bring them with you the entire way to try to realize your goal is very important, and to always provide pretty consistent updates. I know that I could, when I was working with Nancy on the Creating Hope Act, I could call Nancy at 10 at night, and she knows she could call me at 10 at night, and I would pick up the phone. And so building relationships with congressional staff using your connections, whether it's if you have friends or contacts in the state legislature, using them to help forward your message, to get into the office, and to help realize the goal. It's often said in Washington, it's not what you know, but who you know, and there is a little bit of truth to that. It's the connections that you make and maintain on the Hill can sometimes be the difference in something getting done or something not getting done.
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. My name is J.P. Paluskiewicz. I'm Deputy Chief of Staff to Congressman and Dr. Michael Burgess from the 26th District of Texas. Dr. Burgess serves as the Vice Chairman of both the Health Subcommittee and the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I was also a staff negotiator on the user fee bill. Where I want to start is that your role in advocacy is so important, and I'm here to kind of play off of what has already been said, because we have the passion of the advocate and the way that a person who's hooked up with an advocate who introduces legislation and wants to work a bill through regular order. My role is to kind of talk about, I won't say the dark side, but the underbelly, as it were, of how those two things still work but may not work in the way the textbook says they're supposed to work. And we're going to use Nancy's bill as an example. And I'm going to leave names out because the statute of limitations is not up and I see a camera back there. But I think the most important thing to start with is, look, there's a lot of things that divide us right now. Okay. A lot of things. And for a lot of issues, you can have very black or white opinions on where you stand. Should taxes be lower? Should taxes be higher? You could be pretty much in one camp or the other. There doesn't need to be moderate ground. There can be, but people can fall very squarely in one camp. No one is pro-disease. Whatever disease group you're representing, whatever rare condition no one is going, I would like to see more of that in America. Up those numbers. And so that's where I think your involvement is so important, and where we do have common ground. And I will say healthcare, as divided as it's been in the last couple of years and has played out in the media, on a lot of healthcare issues, we really do work in a bipartisan fashion. And I always, kind of say this sometime in my speech, despite our bosses' differences and despite our differences on certain issues, particularly on the ENC, Committee Energy and Commerce, we're very bipartisan when it comes to a lot of public health issues, and we all generally like each other. Despite what you may have been led to believe, I was on a panel about 2 weeks ago, and it was health and tax, and I couldn't use that line because I think the tax people really did hate each other. But all right, so here's where I kind of want to start, is why kind of interacting with the system, and you kind of look and say, well, I've got this great idea, how come it doesn't go anywhere? Look, there are 6,000 bills in the House of Representatives introduced every Congress. Okay? We usually top, about 6,300 or so. People say Congress isn't efficient. Thank God we're not efficient. Can you imagine 6,300 new laws every 2 years? But you kind of look and you say, well, these things take so many years. Why does it take time? I've got this great idea, and even when people agree, we think it's a slam dunk, idea. Why does it not progress? Why does it not move through regular order? Why can't we get the next steps? And that's kind of what I'm going to touch on. First and foremost is, I'm going to throw out this number. 7. And that is the number of Republicans left from the class of '94. And why is that important? the House of Representatives particularly is a very generational body. We have wave elections. Those waves differ in size, but when people kind of think of the Republican takeover in 1995, they think of that as the last major wave before the one that occurred a few years ago in 2010. There are only 7 Republicans left from that wave. So you now have a whole new generation of members of Congress in there who some of these past battles that you may be trying to build off of, when you look to amend old health law or say, well, we did it in this direction, now we want to expand upon it, or we tried it in this disease area, now we want to go in this other direction, who weren't there. Statistically, we're not there. The majority of the House of Representatives has been elected in the last couple of years. And you kind of have to lay a level on top of that so you constantly have to be getting to know your member. Staff is, I'd say, almost even more of a problem in that the turnover among congressional staff can be great. And so again, why do ideas take some time? Well, sometimes you have to go over the same ground over and over again. I have 12 years on the Hill. I have 10 years doing healthcare. If I'm looking at people in the House of Representatives with an R next to their name with a similar tenure, I think there's about 4 of us. So my island has gotten very small. This was my third UFA, my third user fee agreement. So I was fortunate to be invited as a House negotiator because I'd been around a lot longer than the committee staff on some of these issues. And that's going to play into where I'm going with this, which is, Saul kind of mentioned this. He and I both had meetings before we got here. We both are going to have meetings when we get back. At one point in the day, I am usually supposed to be 3 places at one time. I can usually do 2, but 3 is challenging. And the life of a staffer is like that. You are running to a hearing with your boss. You're making sure you have 6 to 7 meetings a day. You're returning phone calls. You're answering constituent mail. You're going through your email. And then all the time during this, you're supposed to be drafting legislation that you all are interested in and lining up all the support. So you've got things pulling us in multiple directions. And that's for every issue. See, in most congressional offices, every staffer is probably doing in the neighborhood of what? 7 issues, 7 to 8. Sometimes if you're the low man on the totem pole, you're doing 10 to 12 because they're the issues that the guys who have been around for a year or two don't want. So you've got 25, 26-year-olds who may have very little experience with some of these laws, being pulled in multiple directions, trying to do the right thing and working with you, but there's only so many hours in the day. So who does that devolve power to? The committee staff, because they're the only ones who can actually spend the day thinking about their issue. Now, I'm in a unique situation. I only do one issue. I do healthcare, and I've convinced my boss to hire me 2 assistants. Don't tell him that I'm getting away with this. It works out really well for me, but I'm the closest thing you're going to find on a personal member staff to a committee staffer. So you devolve a lot of power to the committee staff. So fundamentally, the question of why are the committees important? Because they're the ones who are going to get whatever you want done. They can be the ultimate advocate for you, or they can be the roadblock that's going to stop whatever you're trying to do. So, Saul kind of mentioned this, and okay, so what do? We have this idea, and we work with the advocates, and then we introduce a bill. And then we go and build coalitions. And then you get industry support. And then you're working on your co-sponsors because you're told, well, if it's only got 5 co-sponsors, nobody really cares. So you get up to 180 co-sponsors. And then you're targeting co-sponsors because you have 180 co-sponsors, but they're not on the committee of jurisdiction. So do they really matter? And then you're working on letter writing campaigns. And I want to touch on that for one moment. Each of you, and Nancy referenced this about making anybody able to cry, each of you will have a story to tell, and everyone you work with will have a story to tell. If you have a letter writing campaign and you're all using the same letter, I can get 300 of them. How many letters do I have to write back? 1, because you all wrote the same thing. Now, if you all write in with your personal story, even if you use the same bulk language because it's a coalition and it affects multiple disease groups, I have to write 1 letter for the main body because I'm still responding to the same question. But if you talk about how we met before, or if you talk about our meeting in DC or meeting the congressman, I now have to alter each one of those letters. And it puts a personal spin on it. So now, okay, so that's just my side note. But it's something to think about. But then, okay, you're working on your letter writing campaign, and then you've got members on board who are willing to call the committee, and you've got the staff of the members who are leads, and you've made it bipartisan, and you've got it bicameral, and you've got all of this together. And then guess what? You may not have a slot for a hearing, to go through regular order. Subcommittee schedule might be booked. I've actually been told an idea is so good, but it's too small. I had a bill passed unanimously in the House. I went to the Senate, said, I've got plenty of Senate support. Can you just, send it through? It's too small. Okay. So what then do you have to look for? You sometimes have to look for vehicles. And then you can queue up the right vehicle. And in this case, it was the user fee agreement. And then what? Well, let me kind of lay out how the user fee negotiations went. We met 3 times a day, usually from about 10 o'clock until 12:30, then again from 2 until 4, and then we would usually have another meeting from 5 until 7, or that would be used for a call with FDA. And that was every single day for 5 weeks. Okay. We were in a room working through this language, and we were working in a bipartisan fashion. And so there was a list. And on that list were issues for us to discuss outside of the user fee agreements. And Creating Hope was one of those issues on the list. Why? Because they had done all that work. They had gotten everybody involved. They had gotten the right co-sponsors. They had members willing to go up to the chairman and to the ranking member and say, I want this discussed. I want this included. Okay, those are huge things to actually make happen. All that happened. And it was all to get on a list. And that list was for committee staff to go, so what do we think about Creating Hope Act? And if someone around the table said, I don't want to talk about it, we're vetoing that for this discussion, it got punted. Okay. So even with all that queue up, you want to know why committee staff is important? They felt enough pressure because their boss told them, we have to discuss this on both sides of the aisle. But it was to get on a list. And it was for somebody to go, okay, gain done, Creating Hope Act. And it was probably punted about a dozen times. Yeah. And to think about it, though, you have to keep up that pressure. And you have to go back to the committee staff. And you had to engage members where, Mr. McCall was a great advocate, was not at the table. But I did like the idea. And while it may not have been a Burgess priority for him to introduce the legislation, it was something that I said was worth discussing. So I kept raising it, and some other people kept raising it. And finally, you whittle down the issues where you don't have too much left to talk about. And then we raise it one more time, and ultimately someone's got to say, we're doing this or we're not doing this. And again, why are committee staff important? Because they're going to be in that room. You're not going to know where that room exists, and you're not going to know when they're meeting, but they're going to be meeting, and ultimately that question's going to come up. And you're going to have people who are in no way invested in what you've worked on making the decision of whether you fall one way or the other. And what you need to make sure sometimes is that you have an advocate, whether they're with the committee or not with the committee, at the table saying, no, we're doing this. And if we don't do it in the context of these discussions, there will be an amendment vote on it because my boss is willing to do that. And sometimes that, at times you can say, well, was that ruining the bipartisan flavor because there were some people at the table who were less comfortable with the idea than others? I don't think so. I think ultimately it was about having a discussion. Would you rather have the discussion now among all of us at this table and work through concerns and issues, or would you rather just have an amendment vote, have it pass as is, because I'm pretty sure I've got the votes because Nancy's done all the work, and we've lined up all the co-sponsors with McCall and Butterfield, and I'm willing to play a little bit of hardball. And then people said, okay, so we now have the committee staff on board to have a conversation about it. So the first people we have a conversation with is FDA. FDA could want no part of this. But you know what? We had to keep pushing, and we had to keep going back and forth and negotiating language, and it was because everybody was forced to be bought in. And it got in, and everybody, was at least to a point of content. I'm not saying everybody was happy, but everybody was to a place of content. And then we passed the House, And then we go to another room. And that other room is where the Senate negotiators meet the House negotiators. And the first words out of the Senate negotiator's mouth is, could you just take our bill? And of course the House responds no, and then we have to start the cycle all over again. All right. So, again, would it be great if we could do everything by regular order? Yes. Did we do a lot more by regular order? Yes. Was it a lot more transparent? Yes. However, regular order sometimes precludes you from moving forward, and you can turn what may be a 6-year battle into a 12-year battle very quickly. A vehicle, and whether you go through regular order or use a larger package to get your idea through, the committee staff is going to be key in that, and they're going to be a key part of that, and getting them bought into the idea, and getting their bosses, the chairman, bought in. So, I just kind of wanted to lay through that, it is incredibly difficult, and then, you can be working with someone for 4 years, and then they leave the hill. So, I just want, I'll wrap up there. But I think it's important to know that you do have to think, three-dimensional chess here, and that it's going to involve, even if you have the right people on board and they're on the committees of jurisdiction, that they're going to need to get other people on board and going to need to work with you. And it's not unusual to have it go this rough, where you're just trying to get your idea discussed.
Sure, thank you. And the question is credibility and pharma funding. So when I started, as I mentioned, I was an entirely unknown and a rookie, and the politics that I found. So I'm a staunch liberal Democrat. Everything about me smells of that. Although interestingly, I found quickly that some of my best allies, and some were Democrats and some were conservative Republicans. We just had a meeting of the minds on this issue. So for me, Congressman Waxman had some concerns about the legislation. The legislation creates a positive incentive for industry to create pediatric rare disease drugs that are new molecular entities. And Congressman Waxman just had some concerns about creating positive incentives. I was given the opportunity to meet with him personally, and the meeting was sort of going iffy, and I said, listen, I do want you to know that I don't accept pharma funding. And he stopped and he said, well, that really makes a big difference for me. He is a formidable actor on the Energy and Commerce Committee. He has very informed staff, and their view really matters. And I think that for my particular issue, at the end of the day, it may be the case that one of the reasons, and I don't know because I wasn't in the committee meetings, but maybe one of the reasons that they agreed to work with JP on this issue, maybe one of the factors was a perception that there truly was no conflict of interest. Now, that being said, many advocacy groups do accept pharma funding, and they create very formal Chinese walls to address these issues. And if you are a well-established group, I think it is certainly possible to do that. I will just caution against concerns if you're against perception of conflicts if you're a rookie group like mine.
Great question. There's a stamp that we have that if we get a letter from somebody who is from outside our district, we put a stamp on that letter that says respectfully referred to that individual's member. And so we will forward that letter. If you're from Texas, from Mr. Burgess's district, but write to Mr. Butterfield's office as a constituent letter, we will find out who's your congressional representative and then forward that letter. So it's best to go district by district and to target your individual member of Congress, and to do that in as many districts as you have folks as part of your organization. So you address the letter, to dear Congressman Butterfield, dear Congressman Burgess, and as JP said, to make it personal and make it compelling. I will also note, and I think Nancy wants to say something on this. I would also note that there are often available for free lists of staffers by email, by member, and it lists their email address. And I would encourage you to also send letters via email directly to those staff. And so then it takes it out of the respectfully referred column and then puts it directly into my inbox. My email address is firstname.lastname@mail.house.gov, and I get hundreds of emails a day, but it's my job to look and respond to every one of those. And so there are lots of resources available with respect to who you should contact, and even on committee staff as well. There are resources that tell you who the staffer is that works on a particular issue and the best way to get in contact with them. And so I would recommend going both the old snail mail route, but also to use email campaigns as well.
A couple other comments. First of all, RDLA for free has a terrific software package that you can use for your members. And you should contact Julia on this. We did. And the way it worked is you construct a letter format, and Julia creates a link and a little icon, and you send that to through social media. We had a whole Facebook campaign, and then people can click on the link and they type in their address, and they're automatically given, they're automatically put in a queue so that their letters go to their members' offices. And then Julia can also advise you on an effective way to set up the letter. We also did this for call-in campaigns.
I will stay very general on this, and I won't talk too long because I've been in politics to know once the food comes out, stop talking. But look, being up on the Hill is the important first step. Make a connection to the member and to the district, whether it's because you're from the state, you're from their area. Again, I think everyone in this room comes to the table with something that even if your ask, whatever your ask is at the moment, even if there is an agreement because of a public policy position, you come from a way different place than so many other issues, and keeping that in mind. When advocates come to me or Hill staff and they say, I can't deal with that group, and it's in healthcare, I went, well, who screwed up? Because one of you did. Because there is no reason that a staffer cannot maintain a relationship with any group in this office. And again, the role of the congressional staffer, they're the ones who you're most likely to have the contact with. They're going to be the gateway to the committee staff, okay, and some of the more senior staff. Your letters, everything, they're going to go to those congressional staff. So they're key. And we tend to have very long memories. So, and I'll say this, look, I spend more time with my boss than his wife, and that is depressing on so many levels. But if we do have a really disastrous meeting and you come in and, names are thrown because I can't get on a bill for, maybe my very good reasons or maybe very poor reasons, yeah, you can get a meeting with the boss. What do you think, I'll be whispering in his ear that entire time. And so that's why what are the things that could turn me off? That you don't walk in with that appreciation. And again, you may be catching somebody on a bad day. Here's the 1 to do. And those are a couple of don't do's, very quickly. Here's the 1 to do. Follow up. Okay. Scariest words in a congressional staffer's vocabulary. I'll talk to you next week. All right? Because that means I didn't actually scratch anything off my to-do list. You just became a recurring event on my calendar, okay? Scariest word. Look, you're going to drop off a bunch of materials for me, and I always say this. I have a magical filing cabinet. Okay, I call it magical because it organizes itself and cleans itself out every single night. It's my gray trash bin right by my desk, all right? If you don't actually ask for something, and I may not have an answer for you even if you do ask for something, but if you walk out with no ask and no expectation that you're following up, you go in the magical trash bin. And not many people admit it, but you know what? We have 7 to 10 meetings a day, it's going to happen. What stops you from going into the file cabinet and go into the real file cabinet? That is the scariest words in our vocabulary. I will follow up next week. But you have to do it. And maybe the next week you follow up and you don't get the answer you want. That's not necessarily a bad thing. No. Because would you rather be wasting resources with people who we can't see eye to eye on this? Are you activating your advocates? No, move on. Maybe there's something else you can work with them on. No is just as good as a yes in a lot of situations. And then in a week later, if I say, you know what, I haven't talked to the boss, great. Talk to you next week.
I just do want to say that JP never once said yes to my face. So I'm certainly living proof that no can be just fine. I would just also like to add that I think it is of utmost important to be respectful to absolutely everyone, especially the no's, and you have to be respectful that they're saying no for very good reasons, even if they are too rushed to articulate what those reasons are. And if you make a mistake and a meeting does go poorly, and that happened a couple times in 300 meetings that we had, I called up and I apologized. And then I reached out to other people who, was mutual contacts, and I just explained why I thought the meeting went poorly and worked very hard on improving the relationship, not in cases in which I thought I needed the person, but just because I thought it was the right thing to do, and I wanted to be known as the advocate who would be respectful of everyone.
Can I add just one thing to that? I'm sorry. So I think one of the most important things is to schedule a meeting, to not do a drop-by, an unannounced drop-by. The reason for that is that, as JP and I have been saying, we have lots of meetings every single day, and if you do a drop-by, you're most likely going to hand a folder to the staff assistant, to the to whoever sits up front, and then that will make its way back to the appropriate person, but then we don't have that personal connection. And I don't want you to, I want you to make the most of your visit. And so I would say that it is one of the most important things is to make sure that you actually schedule the meeting as opposed to just doing a drop-by. Because folks are so busy, we're running in a bunch of different directions at the same time. And you want to make sure that we're able to make the connection and to begin a relationship. That's what I would say.
I'll just close with this. No. Well, and to go with again, and this kind of wraps up what I was saying. You're going to get a lot of staff who are new. You're going to have a lot of members who are new. You may be new to going to the Hill. And thus, when you necessarily run into I don't know what I think about this, or I need to research this, or someone who just stares at you blankly, that's an opportunity for you. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Because again, a lot of offices, hey, I know where my boss is on some things, and I can say, yep, we're going to do this or we're going to not. There may be things that even I need to do homework on. And, I would love to give you a yes or a no, but my name isn't on the door. I've been trying to get them to put it there, but it's my boss's, and sometimes they do have to go up the chain. So just keep that in mind, too.
And I would say never be afraid to ask a question.
Yep.